Thank you. Oops, got a little prompt here. Joyce?
I just wanted to say my speaker on my computer isn't working very well, so I'm going to leave and then go on my iPad. Hopefully it will be better. So I just wanted to let you know, okay?
Okay.
We can hear you really well.
Yeah, we hear you great.
Yeah, we can hear you too.
It's really fuzzy, so.
I'll give you a second because the next one is 0.5 updates, which will be from Liam. So I'd like her to participate or be here to hear that. So we'll give her a minute.
Why don't you guys tell Delphine who you are?
Oh, okay. I'll defeat.
While we're waiting.
Hi, I'm Fred Wagner, local
Yes,
resident,
hi.
chair. Guy who hangs around the community. That's about it. Retired. Gets involved in the odd thing here and there.
Cool.
So yeah, I'll just pass it on to have you met anybody else in the committee? Other council members before?
I have met, let me see, I have met Alison, Liam, of course, everybody in office. Michael came around yesterday, pop in briefly.
Okay. Have you met Rob yet? His hand's up in the air there.
Where is he?
With
Where is
Liam?
he?
With Liam.
Oh, is he with Liam?
Yeah.
Oh, I say hi.
Hi, one of the councillors.
Yes, hi.
Welcome aboard.
Yes.
Okay. I don't think you've met John. John, maybe you can just introduce yourself briefly. Thank you.
Hi, yes, I'm like Fred, I'm retired and live on the west side near Bowen Bay. And I'm an architect, and most of my career was as a development manager, managing large real estate developments. So my financial experience is really more about getting financing and running financing loans, etc. So my actual accounting experience is pretty weak.
Okay, thank you.
But welcome.
Yeah, welcome. Joyce, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Joyce Ganong, retired, also community member. My past life included being assistant deputy minister for jobs training, apprenticeship, labor market policy, negotiating federal provincial agreements around labor market policy. And previous to that, head of continuing care, long-term care, home nursing care, homemaker services for the province. So I got a fair understanding of finance from a government perspective. I've also owned my own business. So
Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce. Even I learned something there. Anyway, okay, well, let's move on, please. Point number 5. 5 is the updates. 5.1, capital project
I got,
updates.
a new face on the screen
Oh,
here,
okay.
Fred.
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
which I don't think any of us met.
Steve is my manager on the file this year, so
Okay,
welcome.
great.
I just started with BDO a few months ago, so and was a great asset on the audit, so I thought he could join us.
Great. No, thank you, and welcome as well.
Thanks.
So again, we'll go to point 5.1, capital project update. Liam, if you could lead off, please.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. So if you've been by the community center site, you'll have noticed that the excavation has shifted mostly to rock blasting at this point in time. And there still is a little bit of overburden to be scraped from the site along what will be the future road and parking area right along the fence line to the soccer field. And but then it's mostly continuation of blasting. However, they are finished blasting to the necessary elevation for the basement area underneath the large multi-purpose room, and that's the sort of largest excavated area. The rest of the blasting that's needed is what they call fine-tuned blasting, so they're just taking the top off, and the rest of the facility will be slab on grade and won't have a floating floor, so that's easier to deal with, and some blasting for trenching. So there's still a bit more blasting, but they should be starting forming up the the foundational work for the first concrete pours to occur in the next few weeks. So it's moving along quite well. The fire hall and emergency center project is getting very close to completion. They're targeting the end of June now, and they're one of the challenges that they are experiencing with that project is the need for fill, the need for material. So if there's any extra from the blasting from the community center site, we're going to truck it down to the fire hall. The fire hall needs about 100 truckloads of rock or compactable material. And but otherwise, the fire hall facility itself is looking pretty phenomenal. It's going to be pretty amazing once that's up and running. And the West Van School carpentry program is gearing up to start milling the large Douglas fir logs, and a site has been chosen for building the shelter for the Heritage fire truck, which will be on the, I guess it's the north side of the site, and there's a little trail that'll pop out of the woods right beside where the Heritage truck will be. So that's pretty exciting. I really like that element of the project. The multi-use path is sort of got back up and rolling for a little bit there while we were able to come up with a temporary solution to some of the drainage challenges around the library. We installed a new manhole. You would probably see that right in front of the library. That really will just give us access to the failed pipe and ability to do proper connections for the new drainage system, which will be done at a later date. But the project was able to pave the section of road up the hill, and the remaining paving will happen at a later date. I don't have a date on that yet. And then once that phase of the multi-use path is complete, we're kind of going into a holding pattern while we start to save funds for the next phase and continue to do more detailed planning. The next phase of the path is a more complicated phase, and that's basically from Artisan Square to Grafton Lake. It's probably the most complex, most expensive phase of the project. And so we may pause for at least a year or two before we actually have sufficient funds and a solidified plan. And no matter how we slice it for the next phase, we have to negotiate with private property owners, because one way or the other, we're going to need to come up with some agreements with some private property owners along that path through. So the library cultural corner project, I'm not sure if it's on my list, but that's moving along quite well. We got an update from the director of the library today, and they're zeroing in on doing plantings in the back of the library in the coming week. And then they'll be shifting their focus to the front of the library, where the real construction is going to occur, where they're building the pavilion, the covered outdoor mini stage, which is going to be pretty exciting. So that's moving along quite well. The Snug Cove Wastewater Treatment Plant tender has been let, and we're awaiting responses for that. We're looking also to see if the existing contractor that was brought on board is, sorry, the tender's not been let, but the construction cost estimates have been confirmed, and we're working with the existing contractor to see if we're able to work with them on a project, or whether it will be put out to a more competitive bid. There also the Cove drinking water treatment plant is continuing to move forward, and we're engaging actually a third party to help with some of the challenges that we're experiencing with the technology, so that we can ensure that our design engineers and the technology provider for the treatment plant are looking at all available options. And so we're hopeful that that third-party engineering specialist will be able to help identify a path forward to get us to a fully operational plant in the very near future. And so we're feeling pretty positive about that as well. Yeah, and that's it for my capital updates. If there's any still
Before we move
information.
on, any questions or regards to the points raised by Liam in the last section? Joyce? Oh. Still on mute? And no picture now.
Here we go. Sorry, iPads are different than computers. My apologies. I just have to go on record with this. Liam is not going to be surprised. If we need fill for the fire hall, I assume that because it needs to be compacted, it's for the driving area. If there's any chance that a cistern could go in for collection of water, that would be a wonderful thing. And Liam will not be surprised about that. I just really feel that we have to start paying attention to that on our municipal buildings. So I wanted to be on the record. Thanks.
Thank you. John?
Just a question about the wastewater treatment plant. Are the building permits still on hold? That were being
Yes.
held up?
Yes, so as per council approval, the moratorium is in place until the plant is until the plant has reached the ability to take more capacity. There was the allowance for the existing building permit applications that were already submitted to move forward. And we have been working with those 5 applicants on potential solutions, and a couple of them have shifted to doing a septic field because they had the capacity and ability to do that. And so we're working with each individual property owner that is negatively impacted on trying to find a path forward for them.
Okay, I guess I misunderstood it because I thought the reason we were approving, which has shifted in many ways since, extra funds to allow that go forward was also to release the freeze on those 5 properties, because it was felt by the time they were finished that the capacity would be there for the plant.
That's right. However, you may recall there was a lot of discussion about we still can't issue the building permit without an assurance that they will not connect to the system until we have a guarantee that the plant actually has capacity. So we're confident that the upgrades to the plant will be completed by this winter, and that we then would have adequate data to be able to analyze whether or not capacity is achieved, let's say by March. And that timing might line up with some of the people that are building homes where they would be completing the build on their home right about the same time that we would be completed the project and be confident that we can accommodate them. However, I think we all know how the construction business can unfold in unpredictable ways. And so it's entirely possible we could find ourselves in a bit of a hiccup where the treatment plant wasn't completed and the building projects were completed and they would be looking to hook up, but we couldn't hook them up because the capacity wasn't yet there. And so we want some assurance that we wouldn't be then liable at that point in time, so that we would essentially be exposing ourselves to greater risk if we just went ahead and issued a building permit right now and without any kind of covenant or any kind of language that said that we can still only connect you if there is actual capacity.
Okay, well, it sounds like a very difficult situation for those homeowners.
Okay, thank you. Liam, one just quick question. With regards to the capital projects, do we have any, in terms of our budgets, are we on track basically on all the major projects?
Yes, we are. With the community center, we're really at the front end of the project.
I appreciate that.
6% in, it's kind of a nice place to be because, yeah, we're on budget, we're on schedule, that kind of a thing. Same thing with the fire hall, which is a project that's much further along and very near completion. There may be some cost challenges with the fire hall that we have to negotiate with the primary vendor, with the constructor, with Liberty. And but you know, we're having those discussions and we're trying to sort out what the most cost-effective way is to get us to completion. And I don't anticipate that there will be any big challenges or there's no red flags at this point, and I don't anticipate any sort of unforeseen challenges coming out of that project.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll now move on to some more questions. 5.2, Finance Department updates. And Kristen, I will ask you to provide the information regarding the budget and staff.
Thank you. I can report that the 2022 to 2026 5-year financial plan was approved and given forth in final reading by council at the council meeting last night. So we have a 5-year financial plan bylaw and an annual tax rates bylaw. So the only remaining hurdle for us to enable that we meet all of our statutory reporting deadlines is approval of the audited financial statements. So we're well on our way to getting that. Those deadlines are the May 15th. So we're well on our way there. Staff are getting geared up to prepare the tax notices, and we hope to have them sent out by the last week in May. And the other significant update was Delphine, which we've had the opportunity to introduce ourselves to. So again, welcome to Delphine.
Great. Anyway, thank you. Yeah, it's nice to see you're getting so close to the finish line on these major projects. And I did watch part of the council meeting last night just to see that happen on the budget update. So anyway, appreciate what it's taken to get there as well, and the work that's been involved, but for management and for Kristen and others. So okay, thank you. Any questions in regards to the finance department updates? Hearing none, we'll now move on to new business. 6.1, draft audited financial statements, copies of which you've been all provided a chance to read through, I think, the 39 pages of statement that were provided. And I'll turn it back again to Kristen, please.
Thanks. I did put together a little slideshow for you, so I'll run through them. It just helps to have something to speak to while we're talking about the financial statements. I'll share my screen with you now. I hope that you have the first slide, the review of 2021 draft audit financial statements on your screen.
Yep. I do.
Okay. So we'll start with the revenue side of the equation, and specifically looking at page 6 of the financial statements. I wanted to draw your attention to one of the revenue line items there that was significantly higher than budget, and that's the other fees and charges. So that increase over budget revenue was driven by mainly building permit revenue. We had a significant amount of revenue over budget, so that was good to see. The other things that are in there, of course, are moorage and recreation revenues. Again, those things were both higher than budget. So that was Yeah, good to see. We have federal transfers. Those were grant revenues that related to the federal portion. There was a final small catch-up payment on the Cove Bay Water Treatment Plant grant. And as well, our first draw on the community center grant. So that is in there. The provincial portion makes up a much larger portion of our government transfers. There's the small community grant that's in there. There's funding from TransLink that's in there that related to construction of the multi-use path, as well as additional grants from other provincial organizations like just Bike BC, grants that are funded through the province, through these other smaller organizations. And in total, we received $1.4 million of funding through there. The other revenue line items are things like the private community donations from private individuals in support of the community center, as well as some grants from the Bowen Island Community Foundation and anything received by the library as well, other general municipal donations. And lastly, we have our other revenues. Those are things like tax penalties and interest, miscellaneous types of revenue. I did want to stop and talk a little bit about the investment revenue this year. You can see that it's negative, and that's a result of unrealized losses that were measured as at December 31st, 2021 on the bond fund that resulted in unrealized losses, which were booked at that time at December 31st. So a net investment loss of $45,000 for the year, which was mitigated by actual interest revenue that we earned on our investments held with the First Credit Union. But overall, a net loss of $8,000. So I think it's time for the committee to put on the agenda for a future meeting is to talk about the investment allocation and the investment strategy of the municipality, especially going forward in this uncertain economic climate, and where we should be keeping those funds. We're about to collect a lot of money for our property tax revenue, and we want to make sure that we make good choices with that.
I think that's a good point, and maybe Steph, I'll ask you to make that note for that for a follow-up, but an upcoming meeting. Please. Yeah. Thank you.
The gain on sale of tangible capital assets was a result of the disposition of the lot 3. So as well, we also sold a piece of equipment. So there was some gain on sale, some extraordinary gain there on the sale of tangible capital assets. Looking at the expense side of things, you can find those on page 6 and also more detailed in schedules 2 and 3. The audited financial statements do include the amortization expenses. So there's always a bit of a disconnect between our financial plan and our audited financial statements, because at this point we haven't yet incorporated budgeting for amortization into our financial plan. I think the whole accounting world is going in that direction, and I'm sure Christine can provide a little more insight into that for you. But going forward, and I have seen like a lot of municipalities are budgeting for their amortization. So it's something that I'm keen to look at this year and incorporating that into our 5-year financial plan, because it will create a much better alignment between our fiscal plan note and our actual expenditure note. So this year, there are about $1.7 million in amortization expense that's been added to the fiscal plan. So it's different from what council actually approved in their financial plan budget. Something to note this year in 2021 were the protective services budget. Same for this coming fiscal 2022. There was a significant amount of grant funded projects that were included in the operational expenses in 2021, due to the ongoing impacts of COVID. A lot of those projects weren't able to be carried out. So they have been deferred to 2022. For the most part, though, I will say any of the operational savings that we experienced mainly came about from reductions to professional development expenses, attendance at conferences, that kind of thing, in departments all across the board. And we also had some small savings in several tools and equipment budgets and supply budgets, as well as professional fees across several different departments. Taking a look at the financial assets, you'll find them on page 5. They are made up of our cash and our accounts receivable and the portfolio investments. Looking at note 2 to explain what's making up the accounts receivable, significant amount there is sitting in receivable from government transfers, and that's mainly made up of over $900,000 that we're still waiting for to the final installment for the Cove Bay Water Treatment Plant grant. We had a milestone that we needed to submit a report to the provincial government, had to do with asset management and an asset management plan for the water treatment plant. That was just submitted, I believe, about a month and a half ago by Patrick. So they're just finalizing that. And I did have a communication very recently with the grants administrator at the province. And I believe, can expect that payment within the next couple of weeks. So we're happy to receive that money. There's also some initial grant receivable that's coming for the first phases of the community center construction. And lastly, this significant amount here, $547,000, is money that's being reviewed and should be paid out very, very soon for the work that was done on the multi-use path between Mount Gardner and Carter Road. As far as some of our financial liabilities are concerned, on page 5, you'll see a listing there. The $2.7 million in accounts payable can be broken down into several different little smaller components. A big part of it is $708,000 that we hold on behalf of property owners who are doing development on their property. And we have building permit deposits, which are refunded to them upon getting an occupancy permit or upon them completing the work. Same thing with subdivision deposits on behalf of developers. We had, of course, amounts owing to our regular accounts payable and monies owing on behalf of capital projects. So in total, at the end of 2021, there was about $2.7 million owed to third parties. New this year is a big increase in the deferred revenue amount. Last year we had about $800,000 of deferred revenues. This year it's increased significantly, and that's a result of us receiving our first installment on the community center grant. So the province has upfronted us with an injection of cash to help us get started and start funding the costs of construction, because there often is a delay between incurring the expenses and making those grant claims and getting reimbursed for them. There's $1.5 million owing on the temporary borrowing. That's in relation to the fire hall. We have $3 million of authorized borrowing there, and we've drawn down that borrowing by $1.5 million at the end of December. And these $4.3 million are the long-term debenture debts that are outstanding. We make regular annual payments on those. $2 million for the community center debt and $2.5 million for the Cove Bay Water Treatment Plant debt. I did a little schedule to kind of break out the statutory reserve funds. Councillor Morris had made a suggestion for the financial statements that we break them out between general fund and water fund. So these are the comparative ending of the year balances between 2021 and 2020 for the general fund stat reserves, and as another separate schedule for the water fund stat reserves. So overall in the water funds, they've increased by about $170,000, and our general fund statutory reserves have been drawn down by just under $200,000. The accumulated surplus is the unappropriated surplus amounts. That's made up of about $4.3 million in unappropriated surplus. That amount includes the $1.2 million in COVID restart funds that are being going to be designated to help with the community center construction. It's going to be used to offset any of those costs that were required for creating additional physical spacing or HVAC upgrades, all of that kind of in additional costs that were incurred as a result of changes made from COVID. It's about $1.5 million in accumulated operating surplus that's unappropriated. And then there's other funds in there that are earmarked for the library, for civic facilities, and for the fire hall, that sort of thing. This is a sewer utility surplus. It shows that it's in a deficit. We've actually realized that there's a grouping change that needs to be made with one of the surplus accounts. So actually, in the financial statements, we're going to make this change. There was $59,000 of surplus funds that were incorrectly grouped with the Cove Bay Water Reserve funds. So Cove Bay Water was overstated by $59,000 and sewer utility surplus was understated by $59,000. So in the final draft that goes to council later this week, we're going to make that change, and that deficit in the sewer fund won't be there anymore. So apologize for that. So that's kind of my quick overview of the audited financial statements. I'm thrilled to announce that BDO has provided an unqualified opinion in relation to the December 31st, 2020 financial statements. And I would love to take this opportunity to express my deep appreciation and gratitude to Christine Simpson and to Matt and the rest of the team at BDO and the staff at Deloitte Consulting, who were engaged to assist Bowen Island Municipality with the completion of this year-end accounting work. We couldn't have done it without all of their help, and I'm forever grateful for knowledge and support that you guys bring and your team, and just so thankful. The financial statements need to be presented to council at the special council meeting that's scheduled later this week for May 12th. And there is a requirement that we file the audited financial statements with the ministry by May 15th. And staff are recommending that the Finance Advisory Committee pass the following resolution. And that is that Finance Advisory Committee recommend that council accept the 2021 audited financial statements. So I think.
Thank you, Kristen. I'll just ask any committee members if they have any questions of Kristen prior to us addressing the recommendation.
I do, Joyce.
Joyce, please.
Yeah.
And then Allison.
And I do too, Fred.
Gotcha. Okay.
I think I have 3 questions. One of the questions is in relation to the independent auditor's report that's attached. And I'm wondering, it's to the mayor and councillors. I'm thinking that maybe my question might be more appropriate when we have our in-camera meeting of the auditor. I'm not sure, because it's from the auditor rather than from the municipality. Maybe that question should wait. But I have 2 other questions. One of them is related to the Land Opportunity Reserve Fund. And I see contribution in 424,000, page 25 of 36 or 17 of your financial report. Is that the payment for, is that the purchase of surplus lands? Is that what that is? Is that the repayment of the loan? What is that?
The Land Opportunity Reserve Fund was actually in a deficit position at December 31st, 2020, because they were borrowed. There was a really short timing difference between the actual sale of Lot 3, which happened January 8th of 2021, and the need to book the use of those funds for December 31st to use them for the construction of Cove Bay Water Treatment Plant. So the fund was actually in a deficit position for about 8 days during the first 8 days of 2021. Then when the sale of Lot 3 was finalized on January 8th, those funds, the proceeds of those funds, net proceeds were about 280,000, were deposited to the Land Opportunity Reserve Fund. So that's part of the contribution was the actual receipt of the funds related to Lot 3. And the second piece is the 124,000 that was collected through parcel tax on Cove Bay residents that is used to do that annual repayment back to that fund. So they are repaying 124,000 per year for 10 years. That was the first year of that payment, and you see that contribution going in.
Okay, thanks. I'm glad to see that we are keeping track of that.
Yeah.
And the second one is page 27 of 36 or 19 of your report. Under the pension plan, there's a phrase there that I just think probably is an accounting phrase, but I don't really, I'd like to know if there's anything interesting in the phrase. It says the most recent valuation as at December 31st, 2018, indicated a $2,866 million funding surplus for basic pension benefits on a going concern basis. What is a going concern basis?
Christine, do you want to take that one?
Christine?
Yeah, it assumes that the plan is going to keep continuing versus if it was going to shut down today. So it doesn't include any shutdown costs. So there's a few different valuation methods. So that's the most appropriate one for this statement.
Okay, I knew there was a special definition. Thank you.
There's a few different valuation approaches.
Not in financial trouble.
Okay,
And there's a funding solvency there's a few different ones, but this is
Okay,
thank
I'll
you.
save my other question, Fred.
No, I think it's a good point to bring up in that at the other time.
Okay.
Allison?
I've got a couple of things. I'll just turn pages. On the statement of financial position, there's a $900, which is a small amount for obligation under capital lease, but the amount didn't change. Did we forget a payment, or is there?
No, I think that's one more adjustment that we can look after in the final version.
Okay, and making my notes, I think those questions were, so there's a loss in the consolidated statement of change in net financial assets. So $36,000 loss. And because we've got a consolidated revenue statement, we've got general fund operations, water and sewer utilities. So who is in the loss position?
Which page are you on, Councilor?
I'm on the statement of change in net financial assets. So that's page 7.
I think typically it's related to amortization. So which line are you looking at?
Well, it's the very last, right near the bottom, the net change. There's a $36,000 loss. We started off with an operating surplus of increase of 2.7, and that then turns into a $36,000 loss. So who was, I guess, what, you don't know which fund incurred the loss, or was it a little bit from everybody? I'm guessing it was a general fund loss, but anyhow, not the utilities.
Yeah,
Okay.
again, it's because we've got amortization in there. It's not actually a cash loss.
No, I understand all that, but you've ended up with a net loss position. And in other years, the fiscal plan had a net loss, but it was all to do with the amortization and so you've got a disposal. Never mind, we'll forget that.
When it's in consolidated like that, it's
Yeah, it's really hard to.
yeah.
I wanted to, looking at note 1 on page 9 and 10, I just thought we should draw everybody's attention to a new note, F for Fred, on natural assets.
Mhm.
That and that will be involving ecological systems in our asset management plans. So this is something I think some members of council had wanted. So it's a new note this year, isn't it? We didn't have it last year, did we?
No, we had it last year, note F, yep.
Okay, we did. All right.
Okay.
Here. And just going through here. I sent you some notes about some typos and maybe some of the notes where the wording needed to be tidied up.
Yeah, we incorporated all of those changes. We sent those off this morning.
And, I have to read my own handwriting as I go along here, which isn't always the easiest thing to do. I think you've solved my surplus problems. Oh, and my other major question, which I sent a note, there was under the capital projects agreements on page 18, there was nothing there for the water treatment plant. and yet it's not finished and in service. So, and it's not added to the capital assets. So should that
No.
be a note?
There's no commitment at the end of 2021, though. I didn't think that it met the requirements of any kind of commitment disclosure. It is, from a financial perspective, it's completed. We just haven't actually moved it from work in process to completed assets because it hasn't met that requirement to be in service yet. But
We've
there's
actually
nothing from a
paid the-
financial perspective that would trigger any kind of note disclosure, I don't believe.
So the fixed price contract we had with the contractor has been fully paid?
Yeah.
No holdbacks?
No, there's nothing. There's
Okay.
No, I think we identified in a previous meeting in that case. Yeah.
Okay, and then the other one is just on the taxation in note 12, page 20. I'm guessing there was a huge increase in water parcel taxes versus what we had put in the fiscal plan.
Yeah.
Did we create a whole new parcel tax to add that, or did we just mess up the fiscal plan?
No, we're adding to the fiscal plan. It should read 327,700. So we
Okay.
have that change coming through from the fiscal plan.
Okay. I think that that was it.
Okay, thank you. John? You're on mute, yeah.
Yeah, so just a question on page 16 of 36, which I guess is page 8 of the report. I'm just, and again, it may be, this has already been answered, but disposal of investments and then proceeds of debt. So proceeds of debt of 1.5 million. So is that just that some debt was sold and then transferred somewhere else? Is
That's
that what that
the
is?
fire hall, I think, Kristen.
Receiving the debt.
Yes,
So we borrowed 1.5 million.
correct.
Okay, so you received the 1.5 and then disposal of investments. That's the same thing, sorry.
No disposal of investments. Where do
Or I guess investing transaction and disposal of portfolio investments net 1 million. So
right. So most of it is that we withdrew $1 million out of our MFA investments last year.
okay,
I think that was before the debt was finalized and we required it for cash flow to help with construction on the firewall.
okay.
Okay.
And then on page 23, sorry, which is different than the other one. Sorry, I'm just
Got a
scrolling
note
along
number?
here. Page 23, which is page 15 of the report, and it's talking about accumulated surplus. And so unappropriated surplus, is that just a blanket of all these various funds that are listed elsewhere?
No.
It is 1.2 million of it is the COVID grant that we got. And the rest of it is kind of since the lifetime of the municipality, the accumulated excesses of operating revenues over operating expenses built up over the last 20 years.
So, okay, so it's just one of those placeholder because it's got nothing to do with money.
Earnings, John.
I presume it's nothing to do with money in the bank. It's just.
No, it is. It's cash backed operating surplus.
So is it available to deal with funding issues?
Yes, well, 640,000 of it is going to be used to help fund a wastewater
Okay.
treatment plant. And then we'll probably be, some of them are earmarked for little council priorities and they're rolled up into a big unappropriated surplus account. So there are, there's little smaller amounts set aside for civic facilities, smaller amounts set aside for fire hall facilities. And they're surpluses that have been earmarked by council and set up into their own little account there. And they're not set up by bylaw. So whereas a statutory reserve actually has a bylaw to support it and has to be separately included in the financial plan as a use or a contribution to, unappropriated surpluses are more set up by council resolution.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, and then page 33. Well, actually, the other one, no, the municipality does hold some land which it can still dispose of. So where does that show as an asset?
It would show on our tangible capital asset schedule on page 24. And then there's in the very first column is land, and it's all at historical cost. So it's very much valued at its historical purchase price, which is not obviously close to what the market is.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. And then finally, is the old fire hall part of that land holding?
The land is underneath it, and the building cost would be in with one of the columns there, which is buildings.
Okay.
That building is in excess of 40 years old, so its net book value is 0.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to move on to the resolution. Allison, is your hand up again?
Yeah, I just had one more question. It's on the deferred revenue, and you mentioned in the revenue analysis for the statement of operations that contributions or other revenue, I included community center donations.
Yeah.
And yet and then in the deferred revenue line, you've got another line called contributions. But I was wondering why you've shown a deferred revenue for the community center grant, but because the donations are specifically for the community center, why weren't they added into deferred revenue?
Because they were issued tax receipts. So if they're issued tax receipts, the donor absolves all control of the money, and we have to recognize it as revenue.
I'm not disagreeing with that, but the other side of the coin is they're earmarked morally for the community center, so we can't spend that money for general operations.
No, so they're part of that accumulated surplus. They're one of those little funds that make up accumulated surplus. I think there's about $97,000 in there.
So they got put into that designated pot.
Yeah.
Even though there might have been a net operating loss for the year.
Yep, they're in there.
Okay. Not material, but it's interesting.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so again, I'll propose the recommendation. And John and Allison, you can move your hands up, please, just so you don't lose track of it. I can make the recommendation or propose the recommendation that the Finance Advisory Committee recommend that Council approve the audited financial statements for the year ending December 31st, 2021. And I don't know if we have to put a reference into amendments, Kristen. There's a couple small changes. Probably just say with amendments.
Yeah. As amended.
Or as amended.
Kristen, you had accept, I had approve. Is it which one would you prefer? Or
Council accepts the financial statements?
That's the wording in the local government, in the community charter is accept.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. I just have a seconder to bring it on the table first, please.
Yes, Fred, happy to second.
Thank you, Michael. Joyce, you got your hand up?
I was going to second it, but that's fine.
Okay.
Actually, Fred, I'm actually happy for Joyce to, as a member of the committee, as opposed to myself as a councillor, to second this motion. So if everyone is agreeable, I'd actually like Joyce to be the seconder as a member of as a non-council member of the committee.
Okay. Yeah, Joyce gives us a thumbs up, so we'll have Joyce as seconder. Any other questions before we vote? Seeing none, all in favor?
Right.
Any opposed? I never asked that. I should probably ask that each time. But anyway, seeing none, that recommendation is passed. Thank you very much. We'll now move on to 6.2, which is move to a closed meeting. And the recommendation is spelled out there. Do we have to say it out loud, Steph, or do we just reference it as the agenda for moving to a closed meeting?
Would you mind reading it out loud for the community, please?
Oh, okay.
Or ask someone else too. Michael can.
Hey.
Or Joyce.
I'll go ahead and do it, whatever. That the Finance Advisory Committee moved to a closed meeting pursuant to sections 90.1 of the Community Charter. Meetings that may or must be closed to the public. Meetings that may or must be closed to the public, 90.1. A part of a council meeting may be closed to the public if the subject matter being considered relates to the following. Point L, I think, or discussions with municipal officers and employees respecting municipal objectives, measures, and progress reports for the purposes of preparing an annual report under section 98 in bracket annual municipal report. And that's what it is. That's the recommendation, and I can propose it. Seconder?
I seconded.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and we'll now then move